Hello, young man. Who are you and what do you do?
Hello there. I'm Quipster, and I make Warhammer content on the internet, especially in places like deploymentzone.tv and my YouTube channel, QuipsterNerd.
Right then, Custodes.
Yes, I love Custodes. They were my first army getting back into the hobby in about 2018, and I love their narrative, I love their model range, I love the way they play in the game. Everything about the army I really enjoy.
You said back into the hobby then, and Custodes. So what caused that? Was it a book? Was it like the model range? What was that?
So I fell out of the hobby as a kid. I played when I was about 10, and then I played again when I was about 18. Fell out of the hobby when I discovered parties and girls, basically. And then in the end of 2018, I suffered from a chronic illness called ulcerative colitis, and I was very ill at the time. I got really tired of playing on my Xbox, and I needed something that I could sit and do and be productive almost. I remembered I really loved painting, and in many ways Warhammer is like a bit of a cult because you don't actually fall out of it. So even when I wasn't playing the tabletop game, I was reading the Horus Heresy, I was reading Black Library books. And so reading through books like Master of Mankind, where the Custodes play like a very pivotal role in the story, I had this like emotional connection with them. And so when I looked on the Games Workshop website in 2018 and I saw that Custodes were a faction that you could now play, I was like, yes, that's it, I'm in. And I think I dropped £400 on a Custodes army immediately, which some of those models I took me a year to paint, but we don't like to talk about that. But yeah, so that's when I got back into the tabletop side of the hobby. And I haven't looked back since.
So, if you don't mind me asking, you're old enough to remember the original Custodian artwork in like the 3rd edition, like big black book, yeah? The banana helmeted men stood in front of the golden throne?
Yes, I am. And that was one of the things that always like sparked that sense of wonder in me. There's some very old artwork in the 3rd edition rulebook where it shows these like big armored wardens with axes in front of this like incredible like ziggurat type structure. And I always wondered to myself, who are they? What's their story? And it never really explained who the Custodians were until the Horus Heresy. And once it started to delve into their story, you get this sense that they are bred for a very singular purpose. And everything they do is for that purpose of protecting the Emperor. Everything they do in their lives is for a sense of perfection towards that sense of duty. And I really, really like that. They do everything to perfection, to the point where in their narrative, because they're functionally immortal, they do sort of degrade a little bit over time with their reactions and stuff. And so if their reaction times slip by just a minute fraction, they've lost that sense of perfection and they effectively retire. And I really like that aspect of the story, that they have that sense of perfection they always aspire to.
Aren't you a self-described perfectionist? Is this why? Do you see yourself as a custodian?
I mean, there may be certain personality similarities there.
If you were to recommend one Black Library book or extended fiction piece from Warhammer's like extended canon for the Custodes, for someone to get into the Custodian lore, what would you suggest?
Watchers of the Throne.
Yes.
Immediately. Fantastic book. One of the things I have to say is the guy who wrote that book, Chris Wray, is one of the best authors in Black Library. Absolutely fantastic. And he really understands what it means to be a custodian because they are actually really weird. They're very strange people because they don't understand the world in the same way normal humans do, because they've had so much of their humanity stripped out and replaced with something that's actually very different. And so a custodian looking at the world around him does not have the same perspective as even a space marine or a normal human. And it's very interesting to delve into that. And he really does that with Watchers of the Throne. And that's what I love about that book.
For those that don't know the lore behind the Custodians, how are they recruited? How are they created? Is it similar to the Adeptus Custodes?
Basically, no. So the way that the Custodes recruit is very interesting because it's all tied up with the way the Emperor conquered Terra, or Earth as it is in the Warhammer universe. So basically what the Emperor did was he took the children of noble families throughout Terra and inducted them into the Custodes, because that way these noble families wouldn't try and rebel against the emperor because they were like, oh no, my son might be a custodian, and I cannot have that. And so it's a sort of form of like almost indoctrination into like, no, you are part of the empire now, whether you like it or not.
It's almost like the emperor is a villain, Quipster. Would you go as far as to say that?
Well, he's definitely not a good guy. There are no good guys in Warhammer. But so basically they take very, very young children, much younger than the Space Marines, and what they do is they change them on almost a soul level. The way that it's explained is through the use of like bioalchemy. It's not very well explained or documented in the same way that the Space Marine process of implantation is, because it's very mysterious and no one quite knows how custodians are made. But yeah, it's supposed to be very mysterious, and each custodian is unique. A unique piece of like art, and so many resources are put into making a custodian that there are very, very few of them. However, the difference between a custodian and a Space Marine is supposed to be the same difference between a Space Marine and a normal human. And normal Space Marines can rip apart battalions of human soldiers at a time. And so, yeah, the power level of custodians is just so much greater.
Do you feel that that's represented on the tabletop well enough?
Absolutely not.
In what way?
So this is the thing about custodians. They fall into this very interesting, almost trap. They're not as elite as knights, for example, and also more elite than something like the Grey Knights. And so it's a very difficult balancing act. How do you make them good enough that they can stand in by themselves as an army of 20 models or less, without that being underpowered or overpowered? And also, if you take into account the fact that custodians are a radically new army to the game, I think they're doing okay with the new releases that have come out and the Forge World updates. But I think there are more things that you can do with the custodians that I hope come up in new rules updates.
So whilst we're on the topic of actual tabletop representation and models and mechanics, what is your favourite model or model line for how it plays? Not the model itself, we'll come to that next, but what is your favourite thing for how it plays?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think it's either going to have to be the Telemon Dreadnought or the Alaris Terminators. The Alaris Terminators I love so much because they can just sit there and be murder machines when you need them to be. And they have in very, very interesting strats like Unleash the Lions, where if you have a squad of 5 Alaris Terminators, for example, each individual model becomes its own unit and breaks off.
That's a very good point. We should talk lions quickly, because I know the answer, but people at home might not. Like, this is a tangent. Sorry, everyone at home. Lions versus wolves is a line from Watching the Throne, right?
Yes.
Can you explain to people at home why the custodians are lions, not wolves, as the Space Marines are more like wolves?
Yes, so it's a very big thing, and this goes back to what I was talking about the mentality of the custodians and how it's so different to everyone else. The Astartes, the Space Marines, are bred to be in squads. They're meant to fight as regiments. They're meant to fight together. This sense of brotherhood is extremely important to them.
I was about to say, it's a core part of the heresy and why it was so brutal for them and why the Chaos struggled even to this day, right? Because brotherhood is inherently bred into them.
Exactly. This sense of brotherhood is at the core to the identity of what it means to be a Space Marine. And that is simply not the case for the Custodians. They are extremely individual in everything they do. All of their war gear, even, is extremely tailored and individualized for each Custodian. They are created individually in an individual process for each one. And that is also how they're supposed to fight. The book you're referring to, I think, is Betrayer by Aaron Dembski-Bowden, where a bunch of Space Marines are watching some Custodians fight. It's 5 Custodians versus essentially a horde of enemies. And they're watching these Custodians, and they are remarking about how beautifully they fight. But there's something weird, there's something off about how they fight. And then the captain, the Astartes captain, realizes what's happening. Each Custodian is fighting by himself. He just happens to be next to a bunch of Custodians. They're not fighting in concert with each other. They're fighting individual battles. They're fighting like lions, not wolves.
And there's a wonderful point in Watchers where they reiterate this in terms of how the populace, I guess, views war, where Valerian is sent out to the wall to quell a rebellion, right? And the guardsmen are like, "Where's the rest of you?" And he's like, "I am the only one sent." Because that is in canon what happens, right? A handful, sometimes only one custodian is sent to reinforce like a battalion of Imperial Guard.
Yeah.
And that's meant to be enough, right?
Absolutely. And usually it is enough. They are that powerful. And also, it's a very interesting thing with the Custodes that they're almost, in a way, like these individual warrior monks. The reason they're dressed in gold armor and they're big and they have this presence isn't because they enjoy it. It's not because they want to be flashy. It's because it is expected of them. They are the extension of the Emperor's will. So they are expected to dress in a certain way. They're expected to have highly ornate armor. They do not care about that kind of stuff at all. And that them, having this appearance does have that effect. They will appear on the battlefield, and them appearing is enough for people to go, "Oh no," and they have that kind of presence.
So then, back to Alaris. So they unleash.
Yes.
Like you mentioned about being killy, but this video should come out after our battle report, right? And they did not kill Magnus.
No, they did not kill Magnus.
They did kill a great and clean one though, which is not the easiest task in the world.
No, that is true. It did take 9 of them though.
Yeah, which is also like double the points of a Grey Uncle.
Yeah, exactly. This is the problem with Custodes that they have at the moment. They're not killy enough for what they are, basically. And I think that's just a little balance issue that comes with the army.
Yeah.
It's just the D3 damage on all of the weapons.
But it's fixed by Forge World. You said the Talon one, right? The Talon one's pretty killy. In shooting, in melee, it's pretty killy.
It is. Because it's had a lot of updated rules since. And this is one of the issues with the Custodes range. Forge World is kind of the crux of what you need to build an army that works properly. You need the Telamon. You need the Galatus, which is the sort of venerable dreadnought. You need the Venatari, which are the flying Custodes, because they fill roles that the plastic range kind of can't or doesn't do as efficiently. I hope this gets addressed in the new codex, because I'd love to have an all-plastic army. But conversely, the Custodes model range on Forge World is beautiful. And that's one of the reasons why the army really attracted me, because it's kind of a bit of a joke in my hobby group. I'm as much of a player as I am a painter. I love the painting and hobby side. And Custodes really give you a lot of options to really go into the details of each individual model. And that's one of the parts of the hobby that I really enjoy.
I'm aware, and people on Instagram are aware, that you're painting a lot of Imperial Fists right now, and you're working through your backlog. Are there any Custodes on the bench or in your backlog to be painted, or are you all custoded out at the moment?
No, there are some very interesting things in my painting backlog. So, number 1, I have 3 Venatari, which are going to be... I cannot wait to paint those. Those are going to be really cool. The Venatari are the flying guys. And the other one, which I recently bought on my way up to Warhammer World, was Constantin Valdor, who is the original Captain General of the Custodes during the Horus Heresy. And the really interesting thing about that model is that he's on a 40mm base, which means you can proxy him as just a normal shield captain. And so I'm just going to be like, yes, this is my shield captain, Constantin Caldor.
Maybe it's his grandson. Maybe he's like a...
Yeah, sure, why not? So guys, I've been Quipster. I've been Quipster, and if you want to know anything more about Custodes, you can find me on Instagram at QuipsterNerd. I have a YouTube channel called QuipsterNerd. I make a lot of content as well for deploymentzone.tv, and I'm on a podcast called the Conclave Podcast, which you can find on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.